Bernard Tobin here for RealAgriculture.com. Today we're at the World Dairy Expo, and I'm joined by Dr. J.W. Schroeder from North Dakota State, and an extension specialist, sir. Welcome to RealAgriculture.com.
It's great to be here.
Awesome. Now, you've just finished your presentation, and you're really focused on basically feed refusals, and whether we're talking about waste or cost of doing business. A big question. And as you said, it really is a balancing act. You want to get dry matter into cows, but how much do you waste? What's the, when you tell people about, cost versus, waste, how do you tackle this one?
It's not easy. It's often underestimated, the costs that we have, and it's difficult to quantify it because a little bit of waste scattered on the ground could be 3 to 5%. But when you look at recently reported U.S. figures, almost $2 billion a year feed are lost, which is about 8% of all the feeds we feed. I think we can do a little better job, especially with high-priced feeds.
Right. Now talk about, I guess, whether it's in the bunk, managing your TMR, where does it go off the rails? Where do you see the waste?
Well, we're always looking at individual feeds, but without a doubt, the wet forages are the one with the greatest challenge. That's corn silage, alfalfa haylage. Those are the wet feeds, because they both spoil, as well as, if they're not put up properly, are not as desirable to cattle.
What about feed quality? Obviously, that's what you're coming down to. You also talked about the socialization of cattle, and how they sort of interact with other animals in the bunk. So many different factors.
There's so much to think about, and the dogma was we just give them 5% more feed than what they need. They'll have a continual meal in front of them. TMR now, total mixed ration. Basically, the concept is that every bite is every vitamin, mineral, protein, starch, everything that a cow needs in every bite. The challenge is that does our machinery provide us with the precision to do that? In other words, there's variation in the type of feeds that we put in from day to day, and there's variation in people that are running the equipment, and if we don't run the equipment properly, we induce variability. And so now you picture a pen of cows, and it's typical for a large dairy to have 200 cows in a pen, and they're delivered this several tons of feed. Now, the cow comes to eat, and the social structure ends in here. The younger cows are going to be smaller and more intimidated. They might be pushed away from the bunk. And so when she gets to the bunk, is the feed that was delivered the same feed that she gets to eat, or has it been picked over? Has somebody come through and eaten the best stuff and left her for what's left? And so that's some of the social aspect of trying to make sure we have enough bunk space and that every cow has equal opportunity to get every bit of her diet.
Now you've got different operations, different sizes, different feeding systems. Overall, though, what are some of the, strategies that you talk to producers and you shared here today that farmers can look at, again, to minimize waste and maybe dial it in real good?
Well, the old adage, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, plays into here. There's a lot going on a dairy farm on a daily basis, and it gets to be sometimes a labor limitation on what you can do. But when we had $8 corn, and when our forages now are extremely expensive, it's become evident that we don't want to feed more than we have to. In this environment of precision feeding, we want to be able to feed the exact amount that a cow is going to eat. But that's not as simple as it might sound, because now we're delivering quantities of feed, but we're trying to address individual cow needs. So when you ask about strategies, how might we do this? The first thing is to make sure that we are doing an adequate job, and actually an excellent job, of mixing the feed. Now, you picture this great big vat of feed, and it's being spread out over 100 foot of bunk. Is the feed that's dropped at the beginning and the middle and the end all the same? Yeah. So we start there to make sure we reduce some of that variability. Then is there enough room for all the cows to get up there and eat? Now, once we've done that, what are some other things that we can try to make sure that the cow gets every chance to eat every meal that she wants? And now that we've done such a good job of it, every improvement in milk production has been adding some technology and then fine-tuning it with good management. Now managers are looking at what happens instead of, now traditionally the meal is brought after the morning milking. A lot of our dairies milk 3 times a day. So at that 6 o'clock milking, we deliver fresh feed, the cow comes out of the parlor and helps herself. And that's works wonderfully. But now as we try to look at to drive more milk production, which means eating more to produce more, What happens if we deliver at different times during the day? So one of the strategies I mentioned would be deliver it before the morning and afternoon milking. There's already plenty of feed there. Remember, we're talking about a continually available feed in front of the cows, not a fundamentally empty bunk. There's always feed in front of her. Now what we're trying to do is just limit the amount of feed that's left over at the end of the day, because some of it we have to throw away or find other uses for it. Another strategy is feeding twice during the day. Now you can see that have a labor challenge to it, perhaps, but if we feed with 4 hours after the morning milking and 4 hours after the evening milking, now we're getting cows more fresh feed and more opportunities to eat, so that maybe not every cow is going to eat at the same time. So there's more opportunities to eat the freshest feed, the best quality of feed, which means the cow eats more. And unlike you and I, where we put on a few extra pounds as a result of that, she puts it in the milk bucket, producing more pounds of milk.
What about, just from a dollars and cents perspective, if you do this right, I mean, if you end up on the right side of this equation, what type of savings are you looking at from a perspective, from a percentage?
Well, the savings is obviously going to depend on the cost of the feeds. But for sake of an example, a TMR for an early lactation group probably costs about 10 cents per pound of dry matter that's delivered. And so if that's essentially comes out to about 5 to 6 cents per pound of dry matter that, if it's left over, is potential savings that we could have saved. So we admit that we're going to have a little bit left over, because it depends on the group of cows. An early lactation group, we want to make sure that she has every chance to eat. We don't want the risk of her not having a meal during the day. And for later lactation groups, cows that are more mature, that aren't eating as much, we can take a little bit more risk. They're not going to need as much to eat during that stage of their lactation. You have to think of the dairy cow much as a finely tuned athlete. And early on in her lactation cycle, she's producing more milk than she can possibly eat enough groceries to meet those demands. And so she milks fat off of her back. And so we have to have cows in adequate condition as they come out of the dry period, so they're ready to hit the field, if I can use that sports analogy, and run at full speed until their intake catches up with their production. And so it's when you think about it, each year, or about every 13 months, the cow has a new calf. This calf starts a new lactation. She now goes on a high energy diet, and she's now in there competing as a first stringer rather than sitting on the bench, if I can continue the sports analogy. And so you want your best athletes to have the best of nutrition so they can perform at their maximum.
Now, the final point you mentioned was, hey, no, one size does not fit all here. Measurement is so key. You have to look at your own operation and apply the strategies that fit for you. Is that pretty much the way it sends up?
Yeah, so in the dairy industry, we've fine-tuned things, so a lot of people are doing things in a similar fashion. But the ruminant is a wonderful animal. She's really the great recycler in the world, if you think about it, because he or she, the ruminants, consume things that simple stomach animals like you and I cannot, such as forages. And that's a wonderful feat that these animals can do. But forages are quite variable. So for me to suggest that all dairy farmers should do it this way is only a one-handed comment, because on the other hand, are you milking twice a day or 3 times a day? Are you feeding a lot of wet forages, or are you feeding long hay? All these things that we can. So you're right. A one-size-fit-all is not appropriate here, but it gives us ideas on how we might fine-tune our management to get the best from our cows.
Awesome. Dr. Schroeder, thank you so much for your input today. Great to talk about that. And when you do find the final answer on this one, whether it's waste or cost of doing business, you'll have to come back on.
I'll be the first to call you.
Thanks so much.